So today, for everybody's benefit, we're going to jump into the subject of story. Okay. And some of you guys here are master storytellers. And some of you have learned from some of the best, and can probably run circles around all of us. But I'm even going to challenge you that are master storytellers to kind of pay attention today, because we're probably going to maybe approach it from a different angle. And I think that the danger for us in life is when we are the experts. Okay, some of you guys are master experts. Some of you got PhDs in this stuff. Okay, it's always a red flag when you say, I know it, or I know it all, right? If you can't humble yourself to review or look at it again, or possibly a different way, that's a red flag in your life. Okay, agreed? Got that? Okay. And so why story? And the reason I want to kind of delve into this, and I got a really cool person to engage with today, Sabine, she's over here in the corner just smiling at everybody, is business comes down to four things. Okay, now every expert's got it. Comes down to three things, seven things. I just like every expert says something different. But let me tell you, the business is four things, right? It's innovation. Okay. It's your audience. You got to have some margin so you can make some money. And then it's story. Okay. And I'm going to tell you, as I've worked with different businesses, that's where they stall out. It's like they've got the idea, they got the program, they got the invention, they got whatever, right? And they may have an audience, or maybe they've got some sense of getting an audience, right? And there's some margins in it, whatever they're building with the logistics and stuff, if it's a widget or whatever. Some of you guys are brick and mortar business owners. Some of you got coaching programs or information products. Where people struggle is the story. Even the best of it, myself, I struggle with this story. So I think this is kind of good to take a look at, okay? And as we do this, I want to kind of make it kind of an open engagement, but I want to kind of go back and forth with Sabine on this. And all of you have, most of you, I shouldn't say all of you, but a lot of you, as we've engaged, you've helped me a lot. And I've helped you. Some of you have helped out. Some of you have helped immensely. And Sabine is somebody who has helped me. So like when I say Donald Stojack talks to interesting people, well, who are these people that are the magic behind what I do? Sabine is one of my magic mentors. Okay. And she has helped me a lot with my story that I was telling myself. And I know they're going into 64 years, you think you got it figured out. You're just starting. Okay. It's just like, damn it, right? And I had some stuff that was getting in my way. And who do I turn to? And much to her credit, she recognized that. She says, Donald, can I help you? And she did help me. And this was it was about 6 months ago, Sabine. How long back was it?
Yeah.
And I did, now silly me, I'm just open to help. Probably my biggest fault in life is I just open to people helping me, right? And I've never been that person to think that I can do it all myself. And her help has been profound in how it has changed what I've been doing massively. And the big issue for me had been time and my mismanagement of my time, and to where time was crowding me, and where it was kind of overwhelming me. And she really helped me change my story around that stuff and reverse that energy. So I'm really appreciative. And so kind of what we're going to delve into today is, what is the story you're telling yourself? Okay. Anybody resonate with us? Like, I'm really sorry. Okay. And is your story getting in your way? Right. And how can you tell your story differently and get a different result? And then how can you use your story to engage a bigger audience, right? Because if that's one of the cornerstones of business, and you're not getting all the business you want, maybe your story's off a bit, And then most importantly, I think where Sabine is going to really help us rock it out is how can you change your story and live a more fulfilled, happy, and at peace with yourself life, because your story aligns with the real you. Is anybody game for that? So, Sabine, what's your story?
Thank you. I would love to tell my story. So I'm going to go back a ways, and I'm going to start kind of at the beginning of my job career. I loved helping people, and I figured out the best way to help people was to train. That was an adult teacher. That was how I could teach and recreate stories. And I was in the corporate world for over 20 years, training the last 10. I had my own company. You know, I was really good. Notice what I'm saying was, right? These are cues. These are things that we say that create our stories. So I had lots of questions. I was really curious. I loved putting puzzles together, figure out what was missing. The problem was, for me, something wasn't jiving on the inside. I was everything I was supposed to be, everything my family had told me to be, but I didn't actually feel like me. But what do? You follow the path that's been laid out for you. That's what I did. Until, like many of us, the pandemic hit, and almost overnight, my work went from training really, really well, lots of contracts, to nothing, right? This is a story that many of us have heard, and it is my story. And I was devastated, and I was frustrated, and I certainly did a few fish shakes up to the sky. It felt like travesty, disaster. And then a month later, my story around that changed. About a month into isolation, I had some trauma come up from when I was 8. This childhood trauma I had buried for decades. I had no idea that it existed, although it made sense looking back why I needed to be so perfect in my life, or I tried to. But I went from the pandemic being devastating to, if I would have had all of my work, if my business would have continued to be booming, I don't know how I would have processed what came up. So what was devastating became, for me, became my own little miracle. Like, thank goodness I was in isolation and I could take some time to figure out what was going on and what was coming up. And around the same time, I noticed more and more that there was this breadcrumb trail that was starting to appear. I watched a YouTube ad. I never watch YouTube ad, right? Stories. Don't ever say never. Stay open. I watched this YouTube ad. I found this process to recode what is getting in your way, and using a way that I'd never seen before, using the part of us that creates our instructions, right? Like the part that can access our software. I started working on myself. That led to friends asking me to help find things that they couldn't find. This ultimately, by the end of that first year in the pandemic, led to a massive fork in the road. So last week, if any of you were on last week, Angela mentioned this too. It'll be really interesting to see how many stories have this fork in the road, because I, at the end of the year, still had zero work coming in on the training side, but this door was just opening up in front of me. But this door that was opening for me was full of fear, right? It was the unknown. I had never stepped out of the corporate environment. It was dealing with, oddly enough, all of my skills from before: asking questions, listening, putting puzzles together, finding missing pieces. But it also used intuition. I didn't even know I had it until it was there. And I realized how much I was using it along the way, but I didn't know. It went from, I had to change my story, or I had to decide what I was going to just choose in my story, in this fork in the road. Was I going to stay trying to be that corporate trainer, that instructional designer that I had succeeded at, and that other people understood what a trainer was? Or was I going to walk down this path where I could help people like myself access places that they couldn't access themselves and help them find who they were underneath of all of what they had been told growing up? And those stories from family, that was a huge step for me, but it was one of the best. I mean, I look at right now in my life, there were the 48 years before now, and now there's the second half of my life where I'm different. I get to do different things. And so I decided to choose this amazing path that's been opening up in front of me, using my own old skills, but in completely new ways, and really learning how to trust myself, do it for myself, so then I can walk others through the same thing. And at the end of the day, as Donald had mentioned, it is all about me stepping into my story, my authentic story, not my mother's, not my father's, not my family's, but mine. And once you get over that first couple steps of fear, it feels so much better. But it is hard to change those stories. And so I'm really glad that Donald and I get to share ways of changing stories, recognizing stories in this call today.
And so, but and let's get a little bit tactical to it. Thank you, Sabine. How can we tell a better story?
So to me, the easy thing to look for is, if you have whatever you've said or done, if you don't feel good inside, that's a story that you've got an opportunity with. And it really doesn't matter how far you move that mark in that story. But to me, there's an internal barometer, an internal compass that we all have. And the more we can recognize our own internal compass, it will absolutely point us. So some easy things to do once you feel that is, you can step back from whatever situation you're in and ask a couple questions. Is what I'm in right now, and how, with the story I'm telling about it, is it 100% true? What I found with my clients is that, and I use this metaphor, so I'll bring it in right now. I'll say to them, okay, what you're talking about is this purple pen. What else could be the truth? And there's lots of different possibilities. So asking, I don't feel good, I want something better, what can I change? Asking, is what I'm thinking true? If it's not true, what other possibilities can I also choose? Because in the end of the day, it's a choice. How I saw the pandemic in the beginning was one way, and then how I see it now, completely different. I chose it. I chose my story. So it's about choice.
Is that resonating with anybody? It's kind of interesting. It's like, whatever story you're telling, it's a bold statement. It's total BS, right? I remember working alongside Tony Robbins, and he would just drill it. You change your story, change your state, all this stuff. And sometimes you hear words like that, and you're like, well, okay, great. Now what the heck do I do? And maybe it's recognizing each of us. I'm just as guilty as everybody else of believing my own story, as if it's true, right? And it ain't. It ain't.
But here's the thing, Donald, and for all of us, because you get to choose your story, you can make up a story that's even better.
Yeah.
Right? A story can derail you, but it can just as easily be that internal piece that is that, like, you reaching down to yourself and saying, this is what I want to choose to believe. This is what I want to value, because this is where I want to end up. This is who I want to be. And so you can make it work for you.
So kind of putting yourself in new shoes or different shoes, or somebody maybe that you admire and mentor. I'll put Craig on the spot because I remember when I heard the word Craig Sowers. Okay, I'll pick on you, Craig. Okay, so just you come on my call, you're gonna get picked on, right?
Have big, round, strong shoulders, Donald.
Yeah, okay. And I fought my way on Chet Holmes' team, years ago. And I just this green, I didn't know what the heck I was doing, right? What am I doing? And ahead of me on that team was a guy named Craig Sowers. I just heard the name. There was a couple other three names that just to me were my idols because these guys were doing it, right? And we used to do these Chet trained like crazy. And it was a Thursday call where we would the top producer would dial out live. Remember that, Craig?
Like well, yeah, I'm thinking of one that is memorable.
It's epic, yeah. And so, Craig, because he was the top producer and I was like new green guy on the team, I'm sitting there like, and back in those days, this is before Zoom. I mean, remember the telephones? Anybody remember telephones? You held them up to your ear. I mean, it's like, seriously, like, what were we doing? It looked like dinosaur bones or something like that. But I'm on this call and I hear this guy named Craig Sowers and his voice was just sitting. I'm thinking, oh, I just want that voice. And he dials, we were dialing cold leads. I mean, we were dialing colds, and so Thursday's call was dialing, right? Dialing for dollars, and he dials, right? And we're listening in on the line, right? And you had to be quiet on the line because, like, how many people on the line? And Craig is leading, and he gets the lead on the line, and he did not let go. I mean, it was like, I think it was like 20 minutes of silence on that call.
So here's the way I tell the story. The story, by the way, speaking of stories.
Yeah, speaking of stories, because this is
a story, but personally, we all can have, I think of the story of each of us is like a book. There are many, many chapters, and each chapter itself is a story. So we don't just have one story in our lives, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And anyway, and then this is an incident that we're going to share here. So I was a sales trainer for that division, sales manager trainer. And one of the things we would do, to clarify for everyone, is live outbound calling to give the team an example of how to do it. And this day, I wanted to emphasize overcoming objections. Or I don't know if that was the focus going in, but that's what
it got there.
It is, because actually it was, because I remember in telling the team, every time this person objects, mark it down. And at the end of the call, and the calls are an hour, but we usually spend maybe 40 minutes chasing, getting someone on the call, and then we'd like break it down and discuss afterwards for 20 minutes. Well, this call went way over an hour, didn't have much time to break it down because I kept this one person on the phone, and like within the first 30 seconds, there was an objection. I don't have time, I gotta go. Okay. An hour later, I still have them on the phone. Donald, do you remember? And I had people make their little marks. Do you remember how many objections I overcame?
There was dozens. I mean, we lost.
Yeah,
I think I lost track.
I remember asking everyone, and everyone had anywhere between 22 and 29.
Yeah.
Scott Wilson, to this day, I stay in touch with. He says, "No, man, there was like 42." But you know how much hyperbole that guy has. But yeah, it was like 20 some objections. And we got off the phone as friends. I mean, I finally let him go just because time ran out. I mean, look, I got to go. Is what ended the call.
and our goal was to get the credit card, right? And so this guy, I think, was on the beach. He says, "I'm on the beach. I'm in my shorts, and I don't have my credit card on me." And classic Craig says, "I'll wait." So story, each of us. The examples out there. I remember when I first got in business, what is the story, right? So each of us in our own businesses, we create these stories. I mean, so I'm going to be in business. I bought a building. What was I thinking? My wife and I, we run this big music business, and we thought, oh man, an old church building would be just the ideal thing. And we bought an old church building. That was seriously, what were we thinking? But that was the story we told ourselves, And I remember anybody ever print up a box of business cards? Because, hey, I'm in business, I got to have business cards, right? And then I sat and I looked at that box of cards. Now what do I do with it, right? But somebody said you got to have business cards, or somebody said you have to have a logo. I remember back in the dinosaur years spending a few $1,000s when that was a lot of, still is some money, but I mean, it was a crazy amount of money on a logo. Having, it's like, because somebody said you're in business, you have to have a logo. Anybody ever done that? It's like, really? I talked to a gal just a year ago, spent $10,000 on a logo that was only half done, right? I joined the Chamber of Commerce. I'm in business, joined the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm an introvert, and I go to the meeting and I can barely talk to anybody, right? What was I thinking? What was the story? Right? I remember when I started understanding information products and stuff like that, and I built a custom web. I spent thousands of dollars spending everybody before things like Kajabi. I built a custom membership site, right? I didn't have anybody to sell it to. I think I got 3 sales that didn't even pay the hosting for that thing. And I had spent crazy. Anybody ever made something like that? So in business, we have all these stories that we get wrapped up into, and pretty soon they're taking us over, right? Because we just wrapped up. We're on this hamster wheel, or, hey, I just need to buy another training program, or I just need to join another group, or listen to another expert tell me something, right? And I hate to tell you this, but it ain't it. Sabine, how do we bust out of that stuff?
So, I mean, so much of it, to me, this is what I found for myself, and this is what I found with the people that I've worked with. At the end of the day, it's, as we've all said here, truth is subjective. So it's really stepping in and saying, I'm not going to chase somebody else's version of truth or their judgments or criticism, but rather I'm going to figure out I'm going to figure out. It's a process, but it's figuring out what is your truth. And Craig, you brought up, we all have different stories at different times. I don't know how many of you remember the old Choose Your Own Adventure books, right? Like, to me, that's what this is all about. You get to, at any point, you can look back and look at something in the past, and you can say, I'm going to give that new meaning. And because the old meaning doesn't work for me, you can say, this is a situation going on right now. This doesn't feel good. I'm going to choose to see it from a different slant. You can go back and forth in your own story and choose a different adventure. And if that doesn't work, or it only gets you so far, go back and do it again, do it more. As you grow, as you change, what you need to follow, very well is going to morph as well and evolve with you. Follow it. Listen to your truth.
Any questions? I mean, and some of you guys, I know you're experts in your field that do some of this kind of stuff as well, like that. Any insights, anything else that comes to mind that we can chew on here in a few moments that would be helpful for everybody? Any questions?
Well, I have a question.
Go for
I
it.
kind of have a burning question, because I feel.
And Elaine,
that
how are you doing
change-
today?
Well, I was proud to arrive for what me was early/on time after listening to your little thing about being on time last week. And so that was fantastic. I was in the middle of doing something else, which I was proud to be doing, but I said, I'm committed to be at Donald Talks to Interesting People. So my thing is, I am a writer. I write poetry. I write poetry that transforms the yuck in the moment. I've never been really good. This is part of my story. I've never really been good at telling stories in story form. I felt I couldn't write short stories, blah. But in my 9 years now of attempting to envision being an entrepreneur, I am not. Let's say I haven't gotten my first client. A lot about changing beliefs. I've been through many visualization exercises. I am got a story that I'm still stuck. And I considered joining a program at the beginning of the year. It sounded like too big of a deal. And about exactly story formula, changing the story. I just don't know how to get over that hump. I mean, you talked about once you get over blah, blah, it's easy, Sabina. I don't know how to get over that hump. And I just don't, it's hard to even, I believe that it might be possible, but I just don't know. I mean, I feel like this is like something about me that maybe whatever, not that I had the worst trauma in the world, but my particular trauma just maybe like I'm too fiercely clinging to who I have been and who I am and my own limitations and my comfort level with that.
I'm going to be very bold, and I'm going to, Sabine, can you tell Elaine how she can get a hold of you directly? How
Yeah.
what,
Yeah, sure.
if you could put that in the chat or.
Yep. So I will put that in the chat, and I'm going to explain why it looks the way it does through a little story. So
Here's so Elaine, here's the story. Pay attention.
So what you'll all see with my email is it says Sabine@jenniferrodenher.com. So you've all heard my backstory on the last few years, like me, like many people have been, lots and lots of changes. One of the biggest changes was I have always really not liked my name. And last summer, I got this all of a sudden brilliant idea that if I don't like my name, I get to change it. Why? Because it's my name. And so for all of you who are mothers or fathers who that creates some angst, I did call up my mother first thing, and it wasn't asking for permission, but it was letting her know before the rest of the world knew. And so I am still, Elaine, I'm still in transition. So Jennifer Roden, her was my old name, and which has a married tag on it, and my birth name. And now I'm Sabine. It was a nickname I had for 20 years. That for me, Jennifer was all about staying safe. Sabine is a nickname that I've had, was all about shining. And for me, I put them side by side, and I said, I don't want to chase being safe anymore. I want to shine, and I'll still be safe by doing that. So that's my email. That's why it is in transition. And Elaine, I'll just say this one piece for you, because this is something that I've struggled with and that I've seen a lot of other people struggle with. It's not just your story that you're dealing with. Okay, it's not just yours. I have brown eyes, brown hair. I inherited these things. We also inherit stories, emotions, things like that also come through. It's called epigenetics. And as an example, I was deathly afraid of water almost my entire life. I never had any bad experience with it. In my 20s, I asked my mother about it. I mean, really bad to the extent that I struggled in the shower to just be around that much water. But I asked my mom about it in my teens, and I mentioned it, and she said, "Oh, I have a terrible fear of water as well. That's why I've never gone swimming when you guys were kids." And I thought about that, and I thought about it. Fast forward another 25 years later, what I was able to do, because I was in Mexico and I couldn't get into the water, and I wanted to enjoy my holiday, it turned out when I did the reprogramming on myself, when I held space, what came up was a horrific boat scene. I don't know how long ago it was, but what I saw was many people not making it with this medium-sized boat that was struggling. Once I released that, the next morning I ran into the ocean. It wasn't mine, but it was in me. So some of what we're also dealing with when it comes to stories and things that we're struggling with, things that we say we are, it might be that we've known that our entire life, but it might not be authentically ours. It was just passed on because somebody else couldn't figure it out and it got passed on. So that's another possibility why you can't get to it, or it feels different. Yeah. Tom,
Thank
did
you.
you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, did you ask for like suggestions or things that could help others?
Man, we'll take anything.
Cool, because I put a little bit of this in the chat. I developed a presentation on the same topic about 10 or 12 years ago. Because really what's happening is it really comes down to three things. There's the reality of what happens, and then there's our story about the reality. And from our story, we create our beliefs. And what we do is we collapse them all together and we think they're all true. And for what I found is the trick is if you can start to peel those apart and get down to the reality, because the reality shouldn't have any opinion, it shouldn't have any judgment, it should be just very, very, very bare bones facts. And when you get to the bare bones facts, then you can start looking at it and go, what's another perspective on this? What else is true? What else really happened that's not in my story? And you kind of craft and recreate, and what would someone else think of this? If I told my story to somebody, what would they think? And then you can start rebuilding the story in a way that's more positive and empowering for you. And from there, you can derive a whole new set of beliefs and collapse the good ones together, make that your reality. So I think reality, stories, and our beliefs are very connected, but if you can pull them apart and get to that reality, then you can start reworking the other two.
Thank you, Tom. Another, the other aspect of it too, so it's like, here we are. It's like, what's your story? But, at the end of the day, we want to make some more money. Anybody want to make some more money? Okay, so recognize when we're talking about this story stuff, it's the same thing when you're looking out into the marketplace or you're connecting with a potential client or even a current client. Okay, but the big thing is those potential clients in the marketplace. And what we do in marketing, okay, is we take that story and we tell it from different angles, right? We tell it from our angle looking out. Obviously, we start there, but then try to tell that story from your ideal client's perspective, talking back at you. Have an inanimate object tell that story, right? And so it's taking that story and shaping it every which way. The couple of projects that I did with Jay Abraham were very interesting. And one was a big law firm in Boston that I remember very specifically. And the other one was a portable restroom business. So think, what that was all about, right? Okay. And, it was interesting to watch Jay. And if any of you have ever been around Jay Abraham and how that brain works, to watch how he would take whatever it was and change the story by changing the character. He would just go all around it. And it was like, he'd almost do this simultaneously. Has anybody ever here engaged with Jay much or followed track with him? You know what I'm talking about? It's like, look up Jay. A good video to watch, I always recommend, is Jay Abraham's Strategy of Preeminence. There's a video there that he did, find the one that's about 15 to 20 years old, because he really does it well there. He's kind of bloviated it in recent times, but there's a video that's I think it's about 15 years old, or maybe it's just 10, I don't know, it's whatever, time goes fast. Strategy of Preeminence, but you get a sense of Jay Abraham if you're going to touch anything. But it's taking that story and just looking at it from different perspectives. So as all of you, like you're struggling to get a client in the door or something like that, this all plays into that. Does that make sense? It's so this idea of story, we can wrap it and unwrap it 10 ways to Sunday, right? Back working with Chet Holmes, he had his core story, right? So this idea of story comes up so much. Our story gets in our own way, or we can tell our story differently and get a different result. We can maybe tell our story in a way that builds a new or different bridge to the marketplace, right? Sabine just telling the story about how she realized her new identity, right? And just by telling that story, she starts creating bridges into a new marketplace in a different way. right? I remember when I listened to Craig do that call back so many years ago, I had to change my story, right? I had to say, I can do that, right? It was kind of scary, a little intimidating, but you know, it wasn't more than a month or two after that I was leading that Thursday call. I was the green newbie, listening to Craig Sowers, the master, doing that. And because I changed my story and how I made a decision to look at it differently, you know, I was the guy leading that call and people listening in and making their tick mark. Does that make sense? It's
So
like you-
Donald, what was the story coming into that position? Because I remember your history,
Mhm.
right? You musician, and never in your life had you been involved in sales, and you decided to pursue a sales opportunity.
I was starving to death as a musician.
But what was your story, your personal story? Because our story has so much to do with our own self-image, right?
Mhm.
And we're saying in this regard. In fact, you know, there's an old saying in the sales training world, you'll never outperform your own self-image.
Mhm.
So you had a self-image coming in there. Okay. And you did something, you had a story, self-image in regards to that. I've never done this. I don't think I could do what he just did, but what changed? How did you shift? How did you change your story from that's not what I do to I can do this? And then eventually not only did you do it, but look, today you're training on it.
I had people like you, Craig, I think that challenged me. And so I think what changed my story was the challenge. And I wasn't going to be told I couldn't do it, because when I think so, to Sabine's credit, as she's working with stuff, I recognized earlier in my life that maybe there were people that told me I couldn't do it. And I overcame that and I did it, right? I made it through music conservatory. So from early years, I took the piano, right? And pretty soon, like in junior high, I was going to the university for piano lessons and taking from the university professor, go through high school. My piano teacher never once encouraged me to go into music. My piano teacher was the professor at the music department at the college. And I had intended to go into math because I was really good at math. And the last minute, I says, wait a minute, you can go to college and do music? I says, I want to do that. Nobody told me. And I'm thinking about, I'm going to the university studying with the piano teacher. Eric, you're going to appreciate that, right? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? And I come into the university and the first thing he does is he hands me off to another piano teacher. Okay, think about that, right? And something inside of me, that little voice inside of me said like, God, damn it, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to prove you wrong. And I stuck it out and I made it through, right? 50 people started, only 4 of us finished. I was one of the 4 that finished, right? And so, Craig, I think where my story changed was when we came on Chet's team, you had to, if you had in your first week, you had to do 5 in 5 days. You had to make 5 sales in 5 days, and they gave you the worst leads to start with. Okay. I think I probably like you did when you came on the team. I was at 5 sales by the end of Tuesday, right? And they kind of went, oh, I guess this guy knows what he. But it wasn't because if you tell me I can't do it, I think where my shift was is I'm going to do it. So it was that, I think. And the other thing, I was starving. I mean, literally, we were out of money, and I had to make it work. So partly is that it wasn't something I should do or it wouldn't be nice to do. I had to do it.
Yeah. Can I flesh out that a little bit more?
Please.
Okay. So it's Elaine, you were talking, and we all have embedded, and Tom was kind of referring to this too, embedded personal viewpoints, and they can be subconscious, right? Of who we are, what we're capable of doing. And if those are, and a lot of them are limiting, we have those deep inside in the subconscious. So Donald, you know, apparently one of the things that helped you to move on and up was you were able to, whatever limiting beliefs you may have had, they weren't strong enough to hold you back. Okay.
Mhm.
You're like, okay, I'm the piano story, the piano education story. I mean, so you had that stick-to-itiveness, that determination to push through regardless. Not everyone has that naturally. And I'm not saying you have it naturally. I don't know if you developed it along the way. We don't need to go into that. But if we don't have that, I have that naturally. We've all had obstacles we've had to overcome. And and by the way, so my backstory is I was actually general contractor, got burned out in the business, sold my business, thought I'd go into the sales world, independent sales, pure commission sales. And I was good. And even though, and I had a resistance towards the concept of selling early on. So I had to overcome that. But I got to a spot where I just wasn't breaking through. There was another level. And there was this you talk about me being your mentor. There was this mentor of mine in the sales world, and he was a personal coach, sales coach. And I hired him. And on the very first call, he had me laying down on my living room floor, breathing because I was bawling my eyes out. And what it was, he tapped into a very deep familial blockage that I had with my father that I thought I'd already dealt with years ago. And I was 40, I was in my 40s. I was like 40 years old, 40, I don't remember, 45, anyway, early 40s. Wow. And I had made conscious effort dealing with my father issues from way back when, but they still were stuck in there. And here's the exercise he had me do. And again, this is, everyone has to decide, but he said, I want you to take a piece of paper and just start writing down, I forgive you for, and just until you can't think of anything else. And he says, go to a sacred spot. And there was a spot on the river, which was one of my favorite spots, and looking out over the mountains. And I went and I wrote that down until there's nothing else. I forgive you for this. I forgive you for that. Went out, and he says, hold that thing up by the top corner and light it from the opposite, corner, and just let it burn and then let it go. And obviously I kept, that was huge. It was just a breakthrough moment to let go of what, that these things were holding me back subconsciously that I wasn't aware of. And then of course, keeping him on, retaining him as my mentor was huge as well. Having someone to personally work with me and train me on the subtleties and, of the sales world, and it changed my life.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I had a good life to start with.
Yeah.
So
has this been this good use of your guys' time? You want to do it again next Thursday? Anybody interested in another interesting person? There's lots of interesting people here, and people that I know. So I'm gonna assume that. So I'll reset, and I'm gonna tell you this is going to be very low tech, low complication stuff. Okay, you're just going to get a calendar invite. If you want to see the recording, search this on YouTube, because that's where it's going to go. Find last week's recording, comment on it, and we'll see where we go. If we wear out ourselves here, we'll stop. If we find that we find energy, we'll keep going. It's just that simple. Okay, fair enough for everybody.
good job, Donald.